Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Lens Podcast. It's Tuesday night. I'm here with Jamie Widener we're both from Jotnick's Paranormal. I'm Chad Thomas, as I forgot to say that. How are you doing, Jamie?
Oh man, it's been a day. It's been a day. We apologize for being late. I had some technical audio difficulty stuff. Hard to do this without speakers working, so got it fixed, and here we are. So we're a few moments late, but better late than never, I guess.
Yep, this is
So,
true.
woo.
So how was your week? We won't talk about today, but how was the rest of your week?
Oh man, well, from last week's episode, I was in Cincinnati for work,
Hmm.
and headed home Friday. It's an 8-hour drive, right?
Right.
So from here to here in South Central Pennsylvania, where we are, and what I realized was exactly halfway is a little place called Moundsville, West Virginia.
What's in Moundsville, West Virginia, Jamie?
A big effing mound, dude.
Uh-huh.
There is an Indian burial mound, but across the street from it is the West Virginia Penitentiary, which we've had the pleasure of investigating before.
We have, yeah.
And my cohorts, who are my travelers with me, our audio guy, our video guy, and our cameraman, both are interested in the paranormal. So we talked about it a little bit on the drive or before the drive, and then wound up ducking in, taking the history tour, which we got there just in time for, and here we are afterwards. They were both like, "Wow, that was really cool." I'm like, "Yeah, wait, it's even cooler in the dark."
It's bigger in the dark.
It is, and you don't get everything on the tour, right? You didn't get down to the sugar shack. We didn't get up to the medical ward. We did not get into the solitary cells area underneath as well. And they did get locked in the cell, which was
Mhm.
fun. But it's totally different, and
Mm.
and it's a uniquely different thing at night. Just because obviously it's paranormal, but
Right.
it's cool. It was really cool, and it was a nice little side quest, if you will,
Well, that's
to,
good.
to dip in there and get home. It's still daylight when we get back. So, good
Mhm.
for you.
Cool. Very cool.
How about you? What was your weekend? You did more
Uh,
fun, you did more fun things than I did.
well, I got a chance. This was my week to go see the Whispers in the Dark at Mount Gretna.
Yep.
It was fun. Little less eventful than yours, but um, it was a good time. The actors all did a great job. I had some feedback, but definitely interested in talking to Megan next year to see what input we can give them and see what we can do. I
Yeah.
did pass on our friends from Penn State's information, so they have that now.
Oh, good.
So hopefully we'll make a connection there.
Okay.
That was Friday night. Well, Thursday night I was at Penn State seeing a show that my daughter was in, or not in, but working on.
Yep.
So that was Thursday night. Friday night was Mount Gretna. Saturday night was an investigation at the brewery, which was we had a lot of people. We had 36 people. 38 actually started. Dropped out as the night went on. But
Oh,
kudos to the girl who had ACL surgery a week ago and was there on crutches navigating those stairs, because you know what those stairs are like, Jamie.
I do, and I've had two ACL reconstructions,
Mhm.
so I totally understand that. That is likely the power of Vicodin right there. Um,
But she was
I'm
all
kidding, but not really kidding.
yeah, she was
But
all about it. They had booked this months ago before this had happened, and she was great. She had great input to the investigation. She had a good time. It was her mom and dad, and I think three or four. Like I think there were seven of them total. So
oh wow, that's
they,
well,
they,
that's the power of perseverance. Like you want to do something, you do it.
mm,
Crutches are a hindrance certainly with all the stairs in the place, but the spirit's there, pun
right.
intended.
Yep.
So
They
cool,
stuck
very cool.
they stuck it out to the end. They made it down to the catacombs, and we had enough people that the vat room was full.
Oh,
So I ended up standing at the entrance of the vat room with her mom and dad, um, and we were standing there. And you know how they have those racks that they keep the glassware in to run through the dishwashers?
oh yeah, sure.
They're pretty sturdy, right?
They are. They
We
need to be.
we were sitting there, and something shook one of those racks while we were standing there,
Oh, all
and
right.
that makes a distinct sound when you have a rack full of glasses shake.
Sure does.
And I looked at him and I'm like, "Did you bump that?" He goes, no, I didn't touch it." So there was something there. We had a lot of other things, but that was the one that was like sort of eye opening to me.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, that was my weekend.
Okay.
So
Well, I did not make the investigation because I also went to Penn State to see the same play.
hmm
Uh, and what an interesting show.
it was.
We're
So
not in high school anymore.
nope, nope. It was an abstract absurdist play, and
Yeah.
they did a great job with it,
Yeah,
though.
the cast was great. The quality, the production quality was great. It was a theater in the round. So it was nice to see something different than this traditional stage production that we're used to in at the school levels.
hmm
And I know Zoe had a blast with it. Um, she was tired, but she was excited to get back. Between shows to get back again. So
hmm
and then they spent the day yesterday striking it and then getting set up for the next one already. So I could just roll right through. So
Yep, yep. They are.
yeah, no man.
It
You
it
know,
is a collegiate schedule, not a high school schedule. That's for
right.
sure.
Yep.
So
The professional schedule.
yep. So, but
Here we are, finally on Tuesday, right?
here we are. It's been a week. Yep.
It's been
So
a week.
all right. Well,
Uh,
so
so
should we?
we have some folks joining us already here. Bert says evening, and looks like Todd's here as well. I said evening, gentlemen. Wow, we got upgraded. Nice,
Oh, uh-huh.
cool. Well, hello there too.
Well, that's always nice to hear. So
And Todd has said, "Hey, Albert." So there, as usual, people are talking to each other, not us, which is okay. We're good.
yeah, sometimes that's better.
So, maybe, maybe true.
So anyway,
Well, speaking of things we're going to talk about, what's going on tonight?
well, we're going to talk about. Well, originally I had planned on something, but I broke it down a little bit because it was too much to cover in one episode.
Okay.
So tonight we're going to talk about two legs of what is known as the historic triangle in Virginia. So the historic triangle is made up of three colonial sites that all had a significant part to play in the birth of our nation. They are Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Today, they are all connected by the Colonial Parkway, a quiet stretch of highway that meanders 23 miles through scenic eastern Virginia. In this episode, we are going to focus on the beginnings with Jamestown, then move on, and then move on to the new beginning with Yorktown. We said originally I had planned on incorporating Williamsburg into tonight's discussion, but the more I thought about it, I realized that Williamsburg has enough legend and haunts of its own that it probably deserves its own story. So
Okay.
let's turn the paranormal lens back to 1607 and the first permanent English settlement in the New World.
All right. Look, the next time you decide to pull out some fife and drum quality music here, you got to warn me because I nearly busted out laughing. So, in fact, I did, but I held it.
I,
Oh
I
my gosh.
appreciate that. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to
Sorry.
warn you, Jamie.
Nice touch. I love it. All
So
right. I'm sorry. As you
that's
were.
okay. So, in the early 1600s, Europe was all about exploration. Spain, Portugal, and England were competing to establish colonies in the Americas. There were several unsuccessful attempts to including the Roanoke colony that failed. In 1606, a company called the Virginia Company of London was formed under a charter by King James. This company financed an expedition with several goals: to establish an English colony in the New World, find gold, and a water route to the Pacific Ocean. In December of 1606, three ships carrying around 100 men set sail. After a 3-hour tour, no, that's the wrong show. After a stop in Puerto Rico for supplies, the ships reached the Chesapeake Bay around April 26, 1607. They spent the next 2.5 weeks looking for an ideal place for their settlement. They chose a peninsula on the James River. This was chosen because it met all the criteria set by the Virginia Company. This included being surrounded by water on three sides, far enough inland that it was not prone to Spanish fleet attacks, deep enough water to moor ships, and it was not inhabited by the native population. With the location picked, the ships were moved and the men and supplies were unloaded. The settlement was officially established on May 13th, 1607, and named Jamestown for King James I. The Virginia Company had sent a sealed box with each ship, and these boxes were instructions for establishing the colony and who the council members of the colony would be. The men had been chosen by officials in England, not the members of the settlement. The first president of the new Virginia colony was Edward Winfield. The 6 council members were Bartholomew Gosnold, Christopher Newport, John Martin, John Ratcliffe, George Kendall, and John Smith. The first order of business was to build a fort for protection from the local Powhatan Indians. This was completed and armed by June 15th, so that didn't take very long at all. Though the land was not occupied by the Powhatans, it was their hunting grounds, and this had caused issues. Shortly after that completion, Captain Newport left to get more supplies for the colony. The settlers began to feel the effects of living in a new, unknown environment. Most of the men and boys were not trained in survival. They were gentlemen and skilled craftsmen who lacked the knowledge of frontier survival. They were not accustomed to the diseases of the New World. They were also dealing with slimy, salty water, arsenic runoff, famine, and attacks by the Powhatan tribe. Now, despite these battles, Chief Powhatan sent gifts of food to help the settlers. It was believed that if not for these gifts of food during the earlier years, the settlers would have died from disease or starvation. Tides turned for the settlement in 1609, but not for the better. During a drought, the English began demanding too much food from the Powhatan people. This degraded the relationship between the two parties, and the winter of 1609 and 1610 was known as the Starving Times. Many settlers were afraid to leave the fort in fear of being attacked by the local tribes. They ate anything they could find within the walls. This included any animals within the walls, so think rats, mice, things like that, leather from shoes and belts, and as others died, those who were left chose cannibalism rather than dying of starvation. It is believed by the spring of 1610, 80 to 90% of the original colonists had died. In May of 1610, a group of settlers that had been bound for Jamestown but had become shipwrecked in Bermuda finally arrived at the settlement. In that party was Sir Thomas Gates, the newly named governor, and they found Jamestown in shambles, with the palisades of the fort torn down, gates off their hinges, and food stores running dangerously low. The decision was made to abandon the settlement. Less than a day after leaving, however, Gates and those with him, including the survivors of the Starving Time, were met by news of an incoming fleet. The fleet was bringing the new governor for life, Lord Delaware. So Gates and his party returned to Jamestown. The settlement struggled on for the next 2 years, but in 1612, John Rolfe, one of the survivors from the shipwreck, introduced a new type of tobacco plant to the area. He had acquired seeds from somewhere else, and this new strain of tobacco took hold in the Virginia soil. The tobacco crop became a profitable venture for the Virginia Company, and they were finally able to make money from their investment. 1619 became a pivotal year for the colony. On July 30th, the newly appointed Governor Yeardley called for a representative legislative assembly. This was the first representative government of what would grow into the United States of America. That year, the Virginia Company recruited about 90 women to become wives and start families, something that was part of establishing a permanent colony. Over the past 12 years, about 100 women had made this trip to be with their husbands or other family members, but 1619 it became a focus to make the colony a place for families. It was also in this year that we see the first documented Africans forcibly captured and brought to work in the tobacco fields. Now, you may remember from your history or the Disney movie that John Rolfe and Pocahontas were married in 1614, after she was kidnapped 1 year before. This marriage brought peace between the English and the natives, but in March of 1622, the paramount chief, Opachacanough, that's a mouthful, was tired of the English encroaching on the Powhatan lands. He planned a coordinated attack with several of the tribes against the settlement. Jamestown escaped the brunt of the attack because they were warned by a Powhatan boy who lived with the English. During the attack, 250 to 300 of the 1,200 settlers in Jamestown and surrounding areas were killed. The Powhatan way was to attack and withdraw to see what happened. They were hoping the English would learn their lesson or pack up and leave. This is not the way the English went. They chose to retaliate, and for the next 10 years, the two parties would fight until a tenuous peace agreement was reached in 1632. In 1624, James I revoked the Virginia Company's charter, making Jamestown a royal colony. This did not change the policy towards the Powhatans. Even after the peace agreement in 1632, the colonists kept pushing further into Powhatan territory. In April of 1644, Opequon planned another set of attacks, which resulted in the killing of 350 to 400 of the 8,000 settlers there at the time. The ongoing attacks ended with the capture of the chief in 1646, when he was taken to Jamestown and shot in the back by a guard against orders and killed. This was the downfall of the Powhatan chiefdom. His successors would sign the first treaties with the English people, making them subjects of England. It's in 1676 that we see the next remarkable moment in the history of Jamestown. Bacon's Rebellion happened when the settlers got upset about their tobacco, not pork products, being sold to the English merchants due to the Navigations Act. Add to this high taxes and attacks from Native Americans on the outlying plantations, and the rebellion was inevitable. Nathaniel Bacon rallied about 1,000 settlers to take care of the Indian problem. The group forced Governor Berkeley to commission him to attack the tribes that were attacking the plantations. Unfortunately, Bacon didn't care if the tribes were enemies or friends to the settlers. He went about attacking all of them. Bacon was declared a rebel by Berkeley, and a civil war erupted in the colony. In September, Bacon torched Jamestown, destroying the church, the state house, and around 17 homes. Nathaniel Bacon died in September, bringing the rebellion to an end. Eventually, many of the rebels were captured, and 23 were hanged by Governor Berkeley. This set up another treaty with the Virginia natives. It included many more tribes than the 1646 treaty. It also set up more reservation lands and reinforced a yearly tribute of fish and game that the tribes had to make to the English. Jumping to 1698, we find that fire strikes Jamestown again, this time caused by an inmate awaiting execution. It destroyed the prison and the state house. Luckily, many of the public records were able to be saved. The next year, it was decided to move the capital and all the government functions about 5 miles northeast, what was known as Middle Plantation. At this point, it became known as Williamsburg, in honor of King William III. After the move, life in Jamestown declined. The church was abandoned in the 1750s, and by the end of the 18th century, most of the land was used for farming. In 1861, Confederate William Allen, who owned the island, occupied Jamestown with troops he raised at his own expense. The plan was to blockade the river to help protect Richmond, which was the Confederate capital. When Union forces captured Yorktown, Jamestown was abandoned by the Confederates, and it was now in Union control. It became a meeting point for runaway slaves. It burned down most of the remaining buildings of what was old Jamestown. After the Civil War, Edward Barney purchased Jamestown in 1892. The next year, he donated 22.5 acres to the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, which is now the Virginia Preservation Society, much easier to say.
Oh, yeah.
With federal assistance, a seawall was constructed in 1900 to protect the area from further erosion. The archaeological remains of the original 1607 fort, which had been protected by the seawall, were not discovered until 1996. In 1932, George Craighead Gregory of Richmond was credited with discovering the foundation of the first brick State House building, circa 1646, at Jamestown on the land owned by the Preservation Virginia. Colonial National Monument was authorized and established by the U.S. Congress in 1930. In 1934, the National Park Service obtained the remaining 1,500 acres of the Jamestown Island, which had been under private ownership by the Vermillion family. The National Park Service partnered with Preservation Virginia to preserve the area and present it to visitors in an educational manner. On June 5th, 1936, the National Monument was redesignated as a National Historic Park, becoming known as the Colonial National Historic Park. In the present time, as part of the Colonial National Historic Park, the Jamestown Island area is home to two heritage tourism sites related to the original fort and town. Jamestown Settlement is a living history park and museum located about 1.25 miles away from the original location of the colony. Initially created for the celebration of the 350th anniversary in 1957, Jamestown Settlement is operated by Jamestown Yorktown Foundation and largely sponsored by the Commonwealth of Virginia. It includes a reconstruction of a Powhatan village, the James Fort as it was in 1610 to 1614, and seagoing replicas of the three ships that brought the first settlers, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and Discovery. Needless to say, in the 418 years since the first European settlement in North America was established, a lot of things have happened. With all of that, I would expect that some sort of energy is left here. Most of the original buildings are gone, but we know that the land also absorbs and shares the energy. So we do get some stories of hauntings. So let's start with the Ambler Mansion. This is one of the buildings burned by the freed slaves during the Civil War. The mansion was built on a mass grave that is believed to go back to the early years of sickness and starvation. History tells us that the house had 3 distinct fires before reducing it to a small set of ruins. Was this because of those who suffered to start our nation? There is one known ghost here. She is named Lady Lydia. Lydia was married to Alexander in August of 1776. Shortly after that, he was called to fight in the Revolutionary War. Lydia would walk the shores of the James River and keep watch for him out a second-story window. It was during this time that Benedict Arnold set fire to the Ambler Mansion a second time. It was quickly, the first time. It was quickly repaired, and she continued to live there. She never received letters from her husband, so she originally assumed that he had been killed in battle, but over time she became paranoid that he had only married her for her family's wealth. She feared that he took off with her money rather than going to war. So she decided to take one last walk to the James River, where she drowned herself. Her spirit can be seen walking today from what would have been the rear of the house to the front of the house, then towards the river. Those sensitive to feelings may feel anger and sadness wash over them. This is thought to be a residual haunt, but it is also believed to be a spirit that will rush past people, only seen out of the corner of their eye. This combined with the feeling of being watched and the impression that they shouldn't be there. One visitor reported seeing a swirling mist near one of the remaining walls as they were leaving. Connie Smith was a park ranger in Jamestown in 1991. She had an experience where she relayed, and it was printed in the book, The Hauntings of Williamsburg, Yorktown, and Jamestown. Now, it was her job to open the reception building every morning. On a crisp October morning, she unlocked the door, as she was the first to arrive, and she saw someone scurry into the bookstore. Reluctantly, she followed and found a boy about 12 years of age hiding behind a display. He had dark skin and long black hair. He wore tattered and worn buckskins. She says that when he realized he had been seen, he made a dash for the back door. She expected him to crash into the glass doors that were locked, but instead he vanished. On another occasion in 1996, a tourist named Sandra Atkins was sitting in the old church waiting for her family. It was winter and there wasn't a lot going on. While she waited, she noticed a woman in colonial clothing entering the church tower. Getting up to talk to her, the woman rudely turned and walked away. Now, thinking this was rude of an employee, she mentioned it to the staff at the visitor center. They informed her that they informed her that that day no dressed interpreters were working. Had Sandra crossed paths with the spirit from an earlier time? She is not the only tourist to see people dressed in colonial clothing. Many people report this in seasons when there shouldn't be anyone dressed like this. Are they interacting with a time when life was different? It's hard to say, but with all of that history of that time, there's a possibility that the energy lives on. So, I'm going to pause here for a minute, Jamie, before we jump to Jamestown. Any thoughts?
Well, the history is forever old, right? This is
Hmm.
this is our oldest history, as here in the states anyway. And yeah, I'm not surprised, with the conflicts and the passion. I say this every week: there's passion, there's energy, there's activity.
Hmm.
The passion of those settlers, those natives, who are all conflicting there. Um, yeah, I mean, I can certainly see how there could be, and I was expecting you to tell me about a widow's walk,
Yeah.
kind of story, because that sounds like, the guy's away, she's
Right.
got a view, by the river, all that stuff. So I'm surprised that it was. Well, maybe there was, it just didn't occur
Right.
to it. But yeah, I get it, and it's well, I'm going to say classic stories, right? The things, but
Hmm.
someone out of place, out of time. The kid in the gift shop. Um, so yeah, I mean, it doesn't, none of it surprises me. It's kind of I guess what I
Right.
expected,
Right.
which is cool.
Right. And like you said, this is the earliest history that we have in this country,
Mhm.
other than our Native American history. But
Right. As
unfortunately, we
far
don't
as
have that
settlement, sorry, yeah,
documented.
colonial history, right?
Yeah. So. All right. Well, I'm going to skip ahead a few years. As I said, Jamestown was the birth of the colonial settlement. Williamsburg, we'll talk about in a week or a couple weeks, was the living heart for years, but Yorktown became the moment of rebirth. Um, so let's talk about Yorktown. Yorktown is situated on the York River, just a few miles from the Chesapeake Bay. In 1620, King James I sent Captain Nicholas Marchier to build forts in Virginia. The area at York was picked because it would help complete a log palisade between the College and Queens Creeks. As a side note, Marchier was the third great grandfather of George Washington. So if he hadn't been sent to build those forts, our history would be different.
Yeah.
The fort was built a short distance from the river, down the river from present day Yorktown. Since there was a fort there for protection, a small settlement developed. This settlement grew into a village and then a port and a small commerce center for the growing colony. In 16 or in 19 sorry, in 1691, Yorktown was established as a place to regulate trade and collect taxes on imports and exports to England. Tobacco was inspected here, which led to the development of many warehouses, along with wharves, docks, and businesses needed to support a busy port town. Above the port on a bluff was Main Street. It lined up with stately homes as well as taverns and shops you could find in any colonial town. And I just realized that with my fancy music, I forgot to share the slides.
Oh, good, because Bert's comment was coming back to you when we got done. Like, no pictures. Little sad emoji.
Well, I'm sorry, Bert.
Hey, there you go, Bert. I was wondering too. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, I was so excited about my music, setting the tone, and then I blew it. So, um,
It did set a tone. Effect created.
all right. So above the port on a bluff was Main Street. It was lined with stately homes as well as the taverns and shops you would find in any colonial town. In its heyday in the 1750s, Yorktown had between 250 to 300 buildings and a population close to 2,000 people. Yorktown was the home of some of the United States' first patriots. Principal among them was Thomas Nelson Jr., signer of the Declaration of Independence. David Jameson, a Scots merchant of Yorktown, served in the Virginia Senate and the Privy Council and became acting governor in 1781. Cyrus Griffin, last president of the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation. They were all prominent Yorktown citizens. This port continued to provide for the Virginia colony, well into the Revolutionary War. England looked for a way to split the southern colonies away and decided to occupy Yorktown in the mid 1781. It was here that General Cornwallis intended to refit and supply his army of about 9,000 soldiers. Cornwallis was settled in and waiting for reinforcements from the Royal Navy, all while being shadowed by the Continental force led by Gilbert du Thier and Marquis de Lafayette. While Cornwallis was waiting, the general of the Continental Army, George Washington, got word that the French fleet would be available for a siege somewhere south of New Jersey in the Chesapeake Bay. It was at this point that Washington and Rochambeau moved their 8,000-man army out of New York towards Virginia. On September 28, 1781, Washington, with his Continental troops and French forces, met near Yorktown. Cornwallis is literally dug in and hunkered down in Yorktown. French engineers, along with the Continental and French troops, dig trenches day and night to create a perimeter and get their artillery and troops closer to the British encampment. By October 9th, the Allies are now within musket range of the British. The French start the battle, and the Continental Army joins in with what will almost be a week of relentless artillery fire from the 14 cannons and the nearly 20,000 troops. The British have created redoubts that allow them to continue getting supplies from the river. So Washington orders that new parallel trenches be dug 400 yards closer to the British. The British redoubts will have to be taken by force. The new line was dug and ready by October 12th, and it was decided that the assault would take place on October 14th. Now, I'm going to pick up the story here from the battlefields.org website. On October 14th, on a moonless night, after firing incessant artillery to weaken British defenses, American and French forces to prepare a surprise assault on redoubts 9 and 10. To maintain stealth, the soldiers do not load or prime their weapons. The password for the operation is Rochambeau, which the Americans translate as "Rush on, boys." The assault commences with a diversionary attack on a redoubt further to the north of Yorktown at about 6:30 p.m., giving the appearance that the town itself was to be stormed. Then Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton's force, consisting of a detachment of 400 of his light infantry, assaults Redoubt 10 with bayonets fixed and muskets unloaded to prevent the British defenders from escaping. The coming onslaught, Lieutenant Colonel John Lauren's troops cover the rear of the redoubt. As American troops hack at the abattis with axes, the British are alerted. A British sentry fires at the Americans, and the Americans proceed to assault the fortification, climbing over the parapet and descending into the redoubt. Serious fighting ensues in close quarters, but the British are overwhelmed. It is a stunning victory, with the Americans sustaining only 34 casualties. The French simultaneously assault Redoubt 9, and after an equally fierce firefight, wrested from the control from the British. Cornwallis's position is untenable as the Franco-American alliance has artillery on 3 of his sides, with additional new pieces positioned in the redoubts 9 and 10 after their fall. In a last-ditch effort, Cornwallis orders a futile counterattack on October 15th, which fails miserably. On October 17th, that morning, a lone British drummer boy beating parley and a British officer waving a white handkerchief tied to the end of a sword are seen on a parapet at the forward position of the British lines. Blindfolded and brought inside American lines, the British officer secures terms of surrender for the British Army. October 19th, in a field outside of Yorktown, the capitulation takes place as British troops and their Hessian allies, with flags furled and cased, march sullenly between the contingents of American and French forces. The British seek honorable terms of surrender, but Washington refuses, as American forces were denied that honor in Charlestown, South Carolina, earlier in the war. The battle ended with an estimated 8,978 casualties. Of that number, only 88 were killed of the Americans and 301 were wounded. The British saw 142 killed, 326 wounded, and 7,416 either missing or captured. The Battle of Yorktown marks the collapse of the British war efforts. When the news of Cornwallis's surrender reaches London on November 25th, the Prime Minister, Lord North, declares, "Oh God, it's all over. It is all over." On March 5th, 1782, Parliament passed a bill authorizing the government to make peace with America. Lord North resigns 15 days later. Although it takes the Americans 2 more years of skillful diplomacy to formally secure their independence through the Treaty of Paris, The war is won with the British defeat at Yorktown. So this was truly the rebirth of America. So what does this mean for hauntings? With all this turmoil, does it still live on? According to the colonialghost.com, the ghost of Yorktown, it might. I found this collection of stories that I would like to share. We're going to start with Cornwallis's Cave. When the American and French armies attacked Yorktown, many of the soldiers and the citizens of the town took refuge in various places. One of these places was known as Cornwallis's Cave. It has not been proven that Cornwallis was actually present in the cave, only rumored. Records of the cave date as far back as the 18th century during the pirating days. Smugglers would often use these caves as hideouts. There were also rumors that the cave would be used as a place for satanic worship and rituals in the 1970s. Throughout history, witnesses claim to have heard strange voices and sounds coming from inside. Men's voices, whispers, moaning, and even the reciting of incantations. They insist that there is something evil inside. What is in the caves will never be known because officials have closed it off to tourists. However, one can still peek inside or hear those strange sounds. Next, we're going to look at the Thomas Nelson House. Thomas Nelson was very influential and well known in the 1700s. In addition to a successful merchant and general during the Revolutionary War, he also signed the Declaration of Independence and became the third governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. In 1766, Thomas inherited his father's house and owned it during the siege of Yorktown. He lived in the house with his wife Lucy Grimes and their 11 children. When British troops invaded Yorktown, Cornwallis took refuge in Nelson's house. When Nelson found out, he gave orders to bomb it. During this bombing, many British soldiers lost their lives. One soldier in particular was on the stairway that is currently off limits to visitors today. The soldier has made his presence known throughout the years. In the 20th century, the owner at the time was hosting a luncheon. Guests began to ask her about the supernatural presence in the house, which she denied. Suddenly, the door leading to the stairwell opened with abrupt force. It was so strong that the room started to shake. Something crashed into the sideboard, and several of the dishes shattered on the floor. In addition to the siege and the Revolutionary War, the house also experienced the horrors of the Civil War. The house was used as a hospital to care for wounded soldiers. With the fatally wounded being cared for in the attic, many surgeries were performed in this house, resulting in repugnant odors of decaying flesh. In one specific case, a soldier fell in love with the nurse that was caring for him. Unfortunately, he died before the two could be together. Witnesses have reported seeing his ghost from the window in the attic, fuming and covered in blood. In later years, ruins of another house on the property were found. During the siege, cannon fire destroyed the house, resulting in the deaths of a number of British troops. Witnesses have claimed to have seen figures of men dressed in red dashing throughout the grounds, ducking behind trees. They appeared to be hiding from enemy fire, unaware that they perished over 2 centuries ago. Next, we're going to look at the Moore House. On October 19th, 1781, one of the most notable events in American history took place at the Moore House. The British admitted defeat and signed a treaty giving the Americans their independence. However, the affairs leading up to this monumental event in the history was marred by tragedy. Bombings destroyed over half of Yorktown and many people were killed. One of these unfortunate souls was a man named John Turner. On October 13th, 1781, during an attack, Turner was wounded. He was rushed to the Moore House and was tended to by his wife, Clara. Sadly, Clara couldn't save her husband and he was pronounced dead. The wife's grief was so great she died of a broken heart. While Turner's relationship to the Moore family is unknown, his body is buried at the Moore House grounds. Witnesses have reported seeing a woman crying, wearing a long dress, on the Moore House grounds. It's believed that this is the ghost of Clara Turner, still mourning the loss of her husband. Let's see, then we have the Diggs House. The Diggs House was built in the early 18th century. Dudley Diggs' house is one of the last 2 colonial wooden houses still standing. Inherited from his father, Cole Diggs, Dudley lived happily in this house with his wife, Martha Armistead, for years. Tragedy struck, however, when Martha died during childbirth. Dudley mourned her loss but remarried a woman named Elizabeth Wormley years later. He had 9 children with her and had a successful professional life. As a delegate for York County for 25 years, he was close friends with Patrick Henry, and the two would often protest English rule. Even though he succeeded in life, he never forgot about Martha and would often pray to her in times of trouble. This remained the case until his death in 1790. In 1960, when the house was renovated, workers heard cries coming from the back bedroom. After quietly sneaking up to the room, the horrified men saw a woman hovering above the bed in a blood-soaked nightgown. Since then, other witnesses have reported experiencing supernatural phenomena while near the house. Witnesses say that Martha pleads for help while holding her arms out. And the last one we're going to cover is the surrender field in Yorktown. When the British signed the treaty for surrender at the Moore House, townspeople and soldiers gathered to witness this historic event. The mood amongst the British soldiers was a somber one. The tired, sick, and saddened soldiers had a mix of emotions about the signing. The British began to play a song called "The World Turned Upside Down." At what is now known as Surrender Field, visitors have heard this song being played with no musicians present. The song reportedly plays for hours, reminding tourists of that historic day. In addition to the mysterious music, witnesses have reported hearing cannon fire and seeing ghosts resembling colonial soldiers. It's rumored that one of these ghosts is George Washington's stepson, born to Martha Washington. John Parke Custis, known as Jackie, skated through life living off his inheritance and failing at nearly everything. He was flighty, and Washington spent a lot of time cleaning up his messes. Wanting to prove himself to his stepfather, who reportedly loved him dearly despite his misbehavior, Jackie enlisted in the Continental Army as they were headed to Yorktown. Unfortunately, because of Jackie's pampered lifestyle, he found it difficult to adjust to the life of a soldier. Jackie ended up falling ill and was unable to move from his bed. This prevented him from going back into battle, even though he desperately wanted to. Constant attempts to cure Jackie failed, and he died at the age of 28. At night, in the woods and on the field, a man can be heard reportedly calling out for guidance. Witnesses claim to have seen a man running through the grounds aimlessly and frantically. It would seem that even in death, Jackie still wants to please his stepfather. The historic triangle isn't just 3 points on a map. It's a spiritual corridor. The Colonial Parkway links Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown not only through history, but some say through energy. Travelers driving that stretch after dark have told stories of phantom carriages, lantern lights, and even figures dressed in the 18th century clothing appearing alongside the road, only to fade when the headlights reach them. It's as if these spirits travel freely between these towns, bound by the memories that they share. So think about it like this: Jamestown is the birthplace, a land of struggle, survival, and sacrifice. Yorktown is the culmination, where the independence was won, but at great human cost. Now, join us on November 18th when we focus the paranormal lens on Williamsburg, which is described as the living heart, a city that bridged old world ideals and the new coming revolution. Each town represents a stage of America's history, and each carries the lingering energy of the people who lived, fought, and died here. When we talk about hauntings in the historic triangle, we're not just telling ghost stories, but we're hearing the echoes of our own origins. Before we unpack this, here are some more of my sources for tonight. nps.gov/York/learn/historic culture, nps.gov/James/learn/historic culture / a short history of Jamestown.htm, historicjamestown.org, visit yorktown.org /214 / Yorktown history, battlefields.org, JTFM or JTFmuseums.org. So there's a lot, Jamie. What do you think?
Not my. Well, the same, with respects to energy, right? Yeah, there's a lot that was expended here, from the colonization perspective, these are all places that had to be built from the ground up.
Hmm.
These are all places that were contested. This is Yorktown, I should say, is another place that was contested in a different direction. Not necessarily against or with Native Americans, but with the British forces.
Hmm.
Um, and even probably before that, I guess too. But not necessarily covered here. But there was a lot there, and there's a lot riding on what happened. If the tide would have turned in a different direction, we would be having tea and crumpets for breakfast,
Right.
right? Um, it's that
And
it
beans on
didn't happen.
toast.
Oh, why? Why would you do that? Eh, maybe it's good. I don't know. Um, so yeah, there was a lot riding here. So it's a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and therefore likely a lot of activity.
Hmm.
And that's from the higher view. But, you get into the personal lives of people, and we all have our passions, right?
Right.
We have people we're passionate about. We have our our work, our careers, the things that we do. Um, we have loved ones that we're passionate about beyond our immediate family. So, I can certainly see this being a highly active area, as much as everywhere could be.
Hmm.
And it just gets more focus here because it is such a important place for us as Americans, for the founding of our country and the finalization of the founding. Our freedom comes from this area. Um, so we have a lot to be thankful for because of it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can see all this. Um, how about you? I mean, you spend time here. Like you
Hmm.
certainly are. This is an area you spend a lot of time at. So
I
what's been your experience?
well, I haven't experienced anything in these two Hamlet shires, whatever you want to call them, um, but that's because I haven't spent as much time here.
Okay.
And not, I didn't know the history of some of these areas. Um, like I know Williamsburg because I've spent a lot of time there. I have friends who live there and look forward to going there a couple times a year, typically. But yeah, I didn't. I visited Jamestown when the kids were small. Took them there, and we did the reenactment stuff, and I've got pictures of Ben and Alex with the helmets on their heads, and all sorts of things like that. Um, but I didn't realize how much was there. There's just so much there, and again, this was a time when in touch with I wasn't in touch with my sensitive side, Jamie.
Well,
Was
that's fair. Right.
so I may have not been picking up on things. Um, but I think there is definitely plenty there. We don't have a lot of stories out of Jamestown, but all it is a tourist destination at this point. There's only one person, I believe, one home left on Jamestown Island. So, but the rest of it is now um, all National Park Service, things like that.
Okay.
And it is now an island. It was a peninsula, but I'm not sure if a river made it an island or what. But it's technically an island now. So it's funny how those things happen over the
Mhm.
years. Yorktown there's definitely a lot more going on there. There's more documented because more people are there, more people live there. Um, I know I've been to Yorktown several times and enjoy. Like they have a beach and they have some things like that, so more people are there. Um, and Bert just questioned whether there's any places to do
Sure.
paranormal investigations.
Yep.
I don't know. I'll have to dig into that a little bit further. I know Williamsburg does not have any paranormal investigations. So much of it is owned by the National Park Service that
Yeah.
you
Much
can't.
like Gettysburg, you're not there after dark. You
Right,
have some restrictions on what you can do in the
right,
daylight. That's frowned upon.
right. Now, I will say that Williamsburg does have, and again, I'm jumping a little ahead. Williamsburg has some really good ghost tours that are put on by the
Mm.
National Park Service or the Williamsburg Foundation. Sorry, that's two separate things. The Williamsburg Foundation that actually take you into the reconstructed houses. All the other ones in the area, you may not enter the houses. So I'm guessing that there's probably something like that in Yorktown as well. Jamestown probably shuts down after dark, would be
Right.
my guess. So, but definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, and not far away from us as well.
Right.
Not quite a day trip, but definitely a road trip.
Mhm. I've done it in a day.
Right, and of course, and you
So,
can
you can,
technically,
but you don't get to see very much if you
right?
try to do it in a day.
Yeah.
Um, plugging our friend Steve Dills, an hour and a half away is the historic Hanover Tavern, which you can investigate,
Yes.
which is also part of the colonial experience down there.
Yep.
So
We'll talk to Steve in a couple weeks about that. So
we will.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I think there's definitely plenty of energy still here. I think,
yeah, I can't see how it isn't.
yeah.
The cool thing is if there isn't uh, organized investigative capacity or access,
Mhm.
that's kind of a cool thing in a lot of ways because there's opportunity then. It's just a matter of connection. None of us can write a check big enough, right, to get in.
Right.
But maybe someday someone will and at least document it. Which I'm not aware of any of the bigger shows being there before. So
No.
not that I can recall anyway over the years, but it's possible. I might be wrong, of course, but
So, or maybe it takes a really big checkbook.
it's a bigger check than even they have. I don't know. But I think everything has a price on it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Start a GoFundMe.
Yeah. So,
That's very cool. I mean, I love history stuff, and I know more. I do know more history of Yorktown, of course, because it's much more well documented, as you said.
right.
I'm assuming Jamestown's records, with some of the early stages, with the dilapidation of the fort and some of the surrounding areas, the settlement itself. I'm sure records were lost there.
Mhm.
And with turmoil with the Native Americans and the constant struggle, the fighting, some of that stuff most likely got lost to time.
Right.
Um, the English were very good, or still are very good at record keeping. So
Right.
I don't think it was from lack of effort. It's probably just demise of things.
Mhm. Well, like I said, there were at least 2 fires that destroyed
Yeah,
the state house, which was their government building.
yeah, right
So the
there.
fact that any records were recovered is amazing.
Yep,
So
I agree. Okay.
so yeah. But yeah, definitely a place that I would do a road trip to.
Oh yeah,
So
me too.
but you gotta spend almost a week there to get through all 3 of the areas. So
Retirement age is coming someday, maybe, probably. Well, probably not, but
I
yeah,
I was gonna say, I don't know about me, Jamie.
dream a little dream.
So
We know some others, so
mhm,
we'll live vicariously through them.
this is true. So, well, shall we move on? Do you have any more thoughts on this?
No, I appreciate the topic. It's really cool. I'm looking forward to Williamsburg, and I know more about Williamsburg as well. So, um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the November 18th episode. So, thanks for breaking it out the way you did. This
Mhm.
is really really good.
Yeah, there's no way I could have gotten all 3 of them in one night. So,
We wouldn't sleep tonight. Right.
and I'm sorry I hung on so much of the history of Jamestown, but I thought it was important to sort of
Oh, it is.
establish it. And
Yeah, it really is. And as the first settlement, that's the foundation of all of the rest. So it makes sense. I
so,
agree.
okay, all right. Well, let's move on to what's coming up.
Yeah. So next week, I'm going to take on the what we're calling abducted, the Travis Walton UFO encounter. Travis Walton is a person, and back in 1975, he was, at least he claims, he was abducted in Arizona, and he has quite a story. Been well documented through the years. The film Fire in the Sky, which is homework for everybody, is one of the better representations of his situation. But we're going to take that on um, and see what we think there.
Okay.
Coming up on November 4th, celebrating spirits, the Tales of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, coming right after Halloween, and then November 11th, the Haunted Stronghold, Tales from the Castle of Good Hope in South Africa. Um, that's my episode. And then, as we alluded to, the Hauntings of Virginia Historic Triangle, the Williamsburg episode,
Hmm.
coming up on the 18th. And then we already got to him, but Steve Dills is coming back on the 25th of November. Chad's going to be away on assignment, so Steve is going to try to fill in his big shoes. Um, And I'm gonna let Steve talk about whatever the heck he wants. So, um, because he's gonna do it anyway.
That's
So,
true.
um,
You may get three episodes in one, Jamie.
we might. It's gonna be just make sure you get a snack. Make sure you go to the bathroom first, and make sure that you got nothing else to do. Get everything done, and just pile into your comfortable spot and get into this episode with us. So,
Mhm,
this is Steve's third time on, and we have some experience to say all those things that you need, and that's as much for me as well.
mhm.
Make sure I go to the bathroom first and get a drink. I get a comfortable chair, so I'll be good. But yeah, I'm really excited to see Steve again. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
All right, and then we have a couple investigations left this year. November 8th is starting to sell out. It's right after the end of spooky season, if you will, at the brewery in Brewery's Brewery in Mount Joy, PA, our home base. And then December 6th is our last one for the year. And tickets are still available there. And keep in mind, too, if you got a friend or a family member in the area, someone who's an enthusiast in the paranormal, the tickets are great gifts to give for Christmas, an early Christmas present, perhaps, for that December event. So, um, but yeah, so stuff coming up. We're wrapping up the year. It's hard to believe already. I mean, I know it's October and it's mid-October, in
Mhm.
that matter, but late October even. But it's just always so strange to be talking so far out yet. But there we are. 2025 is coming to an end.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Another one goes by. And then, of course, you found us here tonight, today, wherever you are in the world. We have this very live event, but we're also on all the streamers tomorrow, Wednesday, and then thereafter. But for other information about us as Paranormal Lens as the podcast or Jotnix Paranormal as the team, all of that stuff can be found at Linktree. That is linktr.ee/paranormal lens. And that's all the socials that we have, as well as our website, which is jot-nixparanormal.com. It's NYX for jotnix. And then, of course, if you're looking for information or sharing information with us, some things that you'd like us to do as an episode, or telling us how awesome we are or how terrible, I'll take I guess the second one's probably more true. Paranormal Lens Podcast at gmail.com is the direct connect to Chad and I. Drop us a line, let us know what your thoughts are. We certainly do listener submissions. We've done many, we'll do many more. Just let us know, and we'll fit it into the schedule.
Mhm.
We have a lot coming up, but we self-produce, so we can always move things around. Just need a little time to dig into it, make sure we can cover it well. But we'll be happy to. So just drop us a line. Of course, or leave a message and note in any of the episodes as well. We see all those comments too. That's it,
Yeah,
I
that
think.
is. I think so.
Yeah. All right.
So, any closing thoughts here, Jamie?
Ah, man. Well, Virginia.
Mhm.
The early settlements, the history is all there. I'm sure we'll have many more episodes coming up throughout the state as we get into more things. But you know, it's amazing. Just how far back it all goes.
Yep.
So
There's a lot of sites in Virginia, which again, when you're talking to Steve, have him give you a list. You can do a road trip.
that's true. We could just do a big old circle,
Mhm.
swirl around. Super cool. Of course, stop at the Hanover Taverns is a must do.
Mhm. So,
All right.
all right. Well, then on that note, we will just get this wrapped up. Whether born of legends or truth, the hauntings of Jamestown and Yorktown connect us to the souls who shaped this nation. As you walk those quiet paths, listen closely. You might just hear them too. So until next time, stay alert, stay respectful, and stay curious. Good night, everybody.